Bible study time. 2 more weeks, I believe. Well, tonight and next week, we should be finished with Acts. Then I'll have a little bonus probably after Easter, which is just going to cover like the end of Paul's life. We'll look at some of the things that from history, as well as from the epistles that we can look into, kind of see how his life ended, and kind of bring it all full scope. But next week we'll kind of wrap up things with Acts. So just so you know, that's kind of where we are. Well, tonight we're going to be looking in 28, 1 through 16. And depending on the way you look at it, there was a lady by the name of Violet Jessup. She was either unbelievably lucky or incredibly unlucky. Jessup was born in 1887. And while 6 of her 8 siblings died early in childhood, as you might assume back then, his mortality level was pretty low in the 1800s. She herself suffered a case of tuberculosis that the doctor said she would never survive, and as it seemed, she managed to grow to adulthood. So she survived tuberculosis when all of her other siblings didn't. She went on to survive not just 1, not 2, but 3 major shipwrecks as an adult. So she survived the RMS Olympic, the most famous RMS Titanic, and the HMHS Britannic. She went on to gain the title Miss Unsinkable as the only known person to survive 3 such significant shipwrecks. Well, by this time of Paul's life, you might consider him unsinkable, right? Because, he's been through countless attacks. People have tried to kill him. There's been all kinds of schemes against him, assassination attempts, stoned to death, people attempted to stone him to death. He's been locked up, and he's been beaten. He's been threatened. He's been through the ringer, so to speak, and even survived a ship. So he's been through all of that, and tonight he's going to get snake bit. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about as we look in chapter 28. We're going to begin by reading verses 1 through 10. It says, "Now when they had escaped, they then found out that the island was called Malta. And the natives showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and made us all welcome because of the rain that was falling and because of the cold. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, 'No doubt this man is a murderer, whom, though he has escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow him to live.' But he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. However, they were expecting that he would swell up and suddenly fall down dead. But after they had looked for a long time and so saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. In that region there was an estate of the leading citizen of the island whose name was Publius, who received us and entertained us courteously for 3 days. And it happened that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and dysentery. Paul went in to him and prayed, and he laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed. They also honored us in many ways, and when we departed, they provided us such things as were necessary." All right, so what was going on here in Malta? First of all, that was the island, by the way, that they had all swam to or floated to or, got washed up on, depending on how you look at it, because there were people holding on to pieces of wood, driftwood, parts of the boat that had been broken all to pieces. Some were swimming to the shore. But here they were, wet, cold, it's raining. Remember, this is a storm that caused the boat to crash in the first place. So all this is going on. And they come up onto the kind of wooded area. If island, and it's them unusual. Luke says they were shown unusual kindness. Now, meaning that there was this idea of, what they probably thought they would be treated like. Here they were foreigners, and in most people's mindset, the readers would understand that there was an acceptable form of hospitality according to the culture, and then there was a different level of hospitality when it came to what God would expect for His followers and what Jesus would expect for His followers to display to others. And by that I mean, think about it today. What is the difference in hospitality today? We think about hospitality in this world today versus the hospitality of the world. What would be the difference?
There's less today.
Well, obviously there's a lot less, right? And I was thinking, if you just ask somebody, if they think that they're going to be hospitable to people. They're going to treat people on their level with the same kind of kindness, okay? In other words, they're going to think about what they might have for dinner. I'm bringing somebody, invite them over, or maybe invite them out to lunch after church. I'm going to be hospitable to them. Either I'm going to cook them a dinner, or I'm going to take them out to a restaurant, and I'm going to, get them, some food, make sure they get a meal, make sure they're happy, and just treat them nice. Treat them like a friend would treat, somebody. Just be nice to them. That would be kind of the world's idea of hospitality. And in the back of our minds, we're thinking, well, I'm being hospitable to this person because hopefully I want them to be hospitable to me. I want them to receive what I've done for them. Maybe they'll reciprocate it to me. Have me for dinner. Maybe they'll have me over, because that's what friends do. That's what we do as friends. According to the biblical worldview, Jesus would be hospitable to even people who could not repay, to people who were broke, who were destitute, who had nothing. Who did Jesus go to? He would go to the poor. He would go not only to the poor and the outcasts, he would go to people that no one else would go to, like lepers and stuff, right? People were like, we don't even want to go on the same side of the street as a leper, and yet Jesus would walk right up to them. And so this is the kind of mindset, kind of way Jesus treated people. So in the mind of Luke, he's thinking, this is not the regular way you would treat people. Normally, a foreigner comes onto your land, you're like, we don't even know who you are. What are you coming to do here? Are you, but no, they wanted to treat them with kindness. They made sure that they were kept, they had a fire to get them warm, someplace to get out the rain, to dry off, taken care of. This was an unusual form of kindness. And it's the kind of kindness that we need to have. In the world today, a lot of that is kind of dictated by what we think of hospitality, like, well, the hotel business, the restaurant business. All those people are, trying to be real hospitable to you because, why? You're paying the bill. You're going to give them a tip. You're going to reciprocate that back. When, as far as being Christians, we're to be hospitable even when people who can't pay us back. Even when people aren't necessarily the people that we would say are on our same level. We need to show them kindness. Those that have nothing to repay, those that are broken, those that are destitute, even the strangers that we know nothing about. This is the kind of way that the biblical kind of kindness that Jesus wants us all to show others. So that's the first kind of unusual thing, or something that we can note there in that little first part of the passage. And then notice that Paul was snake bitten. And obviously, it makes sense why this happened. He went to pick up a bundle of sticks and to put it on the fire. If the sticks were stacked up, like a pile of sticks or kindling or whatever, might have been gathered together, might have been smaller sticks that were tied together in a bundle. And he went to grab one in that pile of wood. Obviously, there was a snake in there. And when the sticks got laid on the fire, the heat caused the snake to say, I'm coming out of here, right? I'm getting out of this fire. And so when it came out, it latches on to Paul's hand. And of course, Paul, he just, shakes it off. But instantly, whenever this snake bites him, and the natives see this snake hanging off his hand, apparently they recognized what kind of snake it was. They knew it was a poisonous snake, right? Because the first thing they thought was, oh, yeah, okay, here's this guy. He escaped from the sea. All these guys have just been shipwrecked. I mean, they know where they came from. He's escaped the sea. They don't really know if Paul's like one of these prisoners. They're associating all these guys together. They're just like evil bunch of men, right? They got all these guards around them, protecting them, keeping them, safe. They don't know that Paul isn't different than any one of these other crooks or murderers or whoever they are among all the other prisoners. So for them to think, they think, here's a guilty man, here's a bad man who's escaped the sea, but the gods have caught up to him, right? And the gods have gotten the best of him. And now he's gotten what's justice has come his way. And it's... Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. And so they're believing, okay, he's going to die. But then, he shakes it off, which is going to make sense too. I mean, if a snake bites you, you're not going to go, oh, well, look at there. A snake is latched onto my hand. The first thing you're going to do, instinctively you're going to, I imagine as soon as he got bit, he was like, he shook it off. He kind of went, oh, and then shook it off like that into the fire. I'm sure he didn't pick it up and just kind of look at it. And, kind of sounds like that in the scripture. It sounds like he's hanging on, the snake hanging on. And just, I'm sure it was like instinctively he shakes it off. But by that time, everybody's like, okay, it's only a matter of time. This guy's he's going to begin to swell. He's going to die. He's going to fall down dead. But he doesn't. And by the way, that thought that they had was a common thought back then in that culture. That somebody might be able to get away with certain things for a certain time, but they would get what was coming to them. And like Pat was saying, they had this very much karma would catch up to them. And it was actually a common ancient theme for stories like that to follow. Like a cursed man bringing death upon his shipmates, but justice eventually catching up to him after he would survive the storm. And we even see that played out, remember, in Jonah. We talked about that. How Jonah was the cause of all the storm and trouble. And then when they threw Jonah overboard, okay, and then it was like, okay, now it's calm. Everything's good. So that kind of reinforces that whole thought. It's one guy, and it can cause, he needs to get what's coming to him, and then all will be well. And so that's their kind of common thinking. But he, shakes it off, and then he doesn't die. He doesn't swell up. There's no ill effects whatsoever. And so what did they conclude? What is their conclusion about Paul?
He's a god.
He's a god. Now, this is interesting. There was another time, I think it was Acts 13, where Paul was accused of being a god. Another time. And that time, he said, remember Mars Hill and the whole, everybody was like, they were talking about, what was he saying? That, they wanted to worship Paul. They wanted to fall down and worship him because of miracles he had been doing. And he said, don't worship me. I'm not a god. I'm a mere man. I'm a human just like you guys are. Except for I know Jesus. I know the Lord. I know the living God. But here, notice he doesn't even correct him. He doesn't say a word. Matter of fact, Paul, all he does is just keep on warming himself by the fire, right? He just keeps on doing what he was doing. He went there to put the wood on the fire because he was cold, because he wanted more fire to get warmer, to get drier, and he just keeps doing that. Luke doesn't even say that he turned around and started preaching to them. nor did he share the gospel, say any word about God or Jesus or anything else. He was silent as a church mouse. And it's interesting that he would do that. And that, nothing was ever said about him even preaching. Now, Paul later goes to the village where we see that he heals a prominent figure there. There was a leader in the town, a magistrate, who was a part of, and it was his father who was sick. And so he healed him, prayed over him and healed him. And then there were others who came and received healing as well. So it was kind of like this healing ministry that took place. But there was no preaching. So what kind of evangelism was Paul doing there? Okay, yeah. It's what we call servant evangelism, right? So he wasn't being somebody who was just going to go preach, like tent revival type preaching, share the gospel type messages like he would go into the synagogues and preach and teach. Here, he's these native individuals, these native people, he's going to them and he's simply doing what? He's telling them, hey, God is there to meet me. So did he ever preach the gospel? We don't really know. Luke doesn't really tell us. Maybe he did. I'm sure at some point he probably did preach the gospel. But someone once said, preach the gospel at all times and use words if necessary. So we would do better sometimes to think about our actions being our testimony and our actions being the sharing the gospel more so than our words. Because our actions, like they say, speak louder than words. So they were there 3 months ministering. Perhaps there was more than just healing. I'm sure he did use some words, but Luke doesn't share us really doesn't go into detail. Mainly Luke was focused on this snake event, which really makes it for a good little story. And it preaches good too. I preached that a couple of times, especially with evangelistic style of preaching. I like that story. Because you can take a lot of liberties with it. There's all kinds of stuff you can shake off and throw in the fire and get rid of, All right, let's go ahead and go on to verses 11 through 16. And we'll wrap up this lesson. After 3 months, we sailed into Alexandria in an Alexandrian ship whose figurehead was the twin brothers, which, by the way, was in the Greek mythology, that's the two sons of Zeus. Zeus is who that's referring to. Ships were often named after Greek gods and such like that. So that's kind of what that's talking about, which had wintered there at the island. Now remember, Paul told them not to even do this way back in October, remember? It was beginning to be the October. And Paul said we shouldn't even start this journey. We should just winter here. Let's just stay here. But they said, no, we got to go. We need to go ahead. And the captain said, we're going to make it. And of course, we know. We talked about last week, we even heard from the captain, wherever he is. He might have been locked up down below. But in any case, there was another ship that had already been at the island wintering there. So it's probably anchored offshore of the island, but that's where they would get sustenance and trade with the natives there and those in the village. So that's kind of what was going on. So they get on one of these Alexandrian ships, and landing at Syracuse, we stayed there 3 days. From there, we circled around and reached Rhegium, and after 1 day, the south wind blew, and the next day we came to Puteoli, and from there we found brethren, and we were invited to stay with them 7 days, and so we went toward Rome. And from there, when the brethren heard about us, they came to meet us as far as Appi, Forum, and 3 Inns. When Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. Now when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, but Paul was permitted to dwell by himself with the soldier who guarded him. All right, so we have this mission that is continuing as Paul is on this mission. He's been a man on a mission since he got that call by God to go to Rome, and started to go back to Jerusalem, back to kind of ground zero where it all started, and then make his journey eventually to Rome. So Paul is now maintaining that mission to get to Rome no matter what, and you kind of see the steps by which they took to get there. First of all, they got supplies before leaving Malta, and if you'll see the map, there's Malta out there right off of Cilicia, is where they were on that little island, and then they go up to Syracuse and Rhegium, and then they hit that south wind, which takes them through the pass up to Puteoli, and then over to Epiphorum, and then they make their way into Rome, which is the capital city. So that's kind of where they find themselves. They sail and they finish their journey. And a little less than a week, they stop for a week-long break. We read about that at Puteoli, where they stay with some brethren there. Then a week later, they're arriving in Rome. The prisoners are delivered to the local prison official, and then Paul is kept on house arrest. So basically, he gets to stay by himself in a home with his personal guard. And it's him that is there where he can entertain guests. He can have people come and go. Not only does he have Luke with him, and maybe some other travelers with him. He has them that they can come and see him. They can meet with him. It's here where he will be able to deliver the prison epistles. So Philippians, Colossians, Galatians, Ephesians, those books will be written in Rome while he's there, and that's where he'll hand those off to different people to take them to those churches. So that's why we have those books today. They were written while he was there in Rome on house arrest. And so he's there, and he has that freedom, and that's good. But notice the first thing he does, which we didn't get to read it. It's actually the next verse. But the first thing he does, what do you think the first thing he does once he gets to Rome? He's settling into his newfound home. What do you think he does? All you read verse 17, you figure it out.
He probably thanks God.
When he thanks God, he's certainly going to do that, right? I'm sure he does, even though he doesn't really. Luke doesn't tell us about that, nor is it recorded that he thanked God. I'm sure he did.
Without reading it, I'm going to guess he went to the synagogue.
No, he didn't go to synagogue, but you got the idea, the concept. He gathered with the Jews. What I thought this was amazing is because, remember, the Jews were the ones who wanted to kill him. The Jews were the ones that accused him. The Jews were the ones that... The reason why he had appealed to go to Caesar in the first place, the reason why he's at Rome. You think by now he'd be done with the Jews. But remember, Paul started with the Jews. And then, remember, the Jews kind of got to where he's like, I'm leaving y'all, I'm done with y'all. And he went to the Gentiles, and he started going to the Gentile people, and started going and taking the gospel to them. But he's back to the Jews. You know where that tells you? That his heart, he still has a love for the Jewish people. He still has a love for them, and it shows grace too. Because here he is as somebody who, these are the people who are accusing him, these are the people who want him dead, these are the people who want him locked away, they want to finish him. These are the same people that try to, scheme against him, and yet he says, I want to share the gospel with you, I want to come to you, I want to communicate my desire, the direction, why I'm doing this, why I'm living this way, why I've made this choice to follow Jesus. And he wanted to communicate that with them. And that's what we call a man on a mission. He had a mission to start with, and he wasn't going to give it up. He was going to keep on keeping on. And so certainly inspiring to us. And when we think about our mission, what does this tell us about our mission? What is it about us? Don't we have a mission as well? All of us have that mission. your mission might be different than my mission. People, you have a different kind of group of people that God has sent you out to influence, impact. It starts with the people in your household, and then those that, maybe you're associated with, the immediate circle of influence, and then, further out with people that you come in contact with, that you have some impact in their life, whether that be friends or associates. And so we have a mission to them. We have a mission to carry the gospel. And shouldn't we live as Paul did? Live like a man on a mission and don't let anything hinder us. But what kind of mission is your mission? What is it? How is it that you will feel most comfortable sharing the gospel? Some people are talkers. Some people can talk to anybody. I'm a talker. I can pretty much talk to anybody. I'll talk to anybody. But some people are scared to death to talk, And so can someone who's scared to death talk can still have a mission? Absolutely. There's actions. And sometimes actions don't even have to be visible actions, right? They can be behind the scenes actions. It's still making an impact. I've heard about people doing kind acts like, what's that?
Pay forward.
Paying it forward, yeah. Doing stuff like that, or one example of paying it forward. I've heard of people, finding out somebody has struggling. Maybe they find out somebody's struggling with, making ends meet, or maybe being able to afford some groceries or something, and then they get some groceries, and then you find out, where they live, and you just, when they're not home, you bring the groceries and you sit them on their doorstep and you just leave. Now. You can do that, and they won't know it as long as they don't got one of them doorbell cameras, right? I can't tell you how many times when me and Nate and Lydia was out here passing out the Christmas fires and the cameras. I can't tell you how many times I walk up to the door and like, the little whistle camera, it'll whistle at me or be like, you are being recorded. Someone would literally say, you are being recorded now. And say, or they would have different little voices. I'm like, okay, well, they're recording me putting this on their doorstep. So if if they have a camera like that, you can't be hidden. But, you can do stuff like that and not even be seen. You don't have to be seen. You don't have to do it visibly and make a difference, make an impact. Like Charlie said, paying it forward would be like if you pay for somebody's meal behind you, in line, if you're in a drive-thru or in a restaurant, pay for somebody's meal, help them out. So those are kind of ways that you can show kindness, do kind acts. I think one of the things that Lynn's working on is really, I think, a good thing, and that's really trying to show appreciation and kindness to the school back here. And I think we're going to try to maybe do a cookout for the staff of the school back here at River Oaks Middle School. So that's a wonderful thing. And that's nothing but making a meal, cooking some hamburgers, some hot dogs, and chips and drinks, and just passing them out to teachers and to staff members. But just a little something to show kindness, something as simple as that. And, that's the kind of thing that we need to understand. Whatever your mission is, whether that's going and helping like an orphanage or working with at-risk children. I got this thing in the mail. We got it in the mail today at the church. It's an organization. It's called, I think they call it, what is it called? I'm messing it up now. Anyway, there's something about Without Walls. And I want to think of maybe say World Without Walls or Mission Without Walls, whatever. But anyway, it's about taking out and going out to these kind of depressed areas. In eastern Charleston, there's a lot of areas that are depressed, and the kids are really at risk. They're not getting the assistance they need as far as education and resources. A lot of them come to school with no food. They have nothing to eat. They go home. They have no dinner. They're lucky to get any assistance or help with homework and stuff like that. And these kids are, they're the future of this community and those communities. And so this organization is going in and bringing volunteers in. And some of them are they're asking to pay for some people. They're actually looking to hire some people to help out in different positions. But if nothing else, just going in and providing like a meal before they go home. So you can like cook a meal for the kids to have a supper meal before they go home. The school and all will get them home, but make sure that they get a meal. I can't imagine my kids, going to school, that morning they have nothing to eat, and then they, maybe surely they get a lunch provided for them by the school, but then they go home and they have no supper. And they're expected to do homework, and, so they have different ways. This organization, they ask them for tutors, for mentors, help people to help out with activities, with meals, all these kind of things you can get involved with. Those are kind of ways you can make an impact. There's all kinds of ways we can be on mission, all kinds of ways we can impact people with the gospel, because the gospel isn't all about just preaching the Bible. It's also about showing kindness with our actions and showing love in those practical ways. So, what is preventing us? What is hindering us? Paul didn't let anything stop him, right? Even when people said, Paul, you don't want to do that. You're going to die. Paul, you're going to be tied up. You're going to be bound up. Look, I'm going to show you what you're going to look like. Here, let me tie my belt around my arms. Remember that guy? He was literally showing him, this is what you're going to look like, Paul. Paul said, it doesn't matter. I'm dead already. I'm ready to go. If the Lord wants me to die, I'm going to die. I'm going. Paul didn't let anything stop him. He didn't let the threats. He didn't let the beatings, the arrest. He didn't let the accusations. He didn't let words. He didn't let the elements, like the storm, the shipwreck, the snake bite. He would not be shaken. He would be Mr. Unsinkable, right? And that's what we need to be. Mr. or Mrs. Unsinkable. We don't let anything stop us from accomplishing our mission. Once you define it, you know it, you believe in it, then get about doing it and don't let anybody stop you from doing it. All right. Hopefully you've been encouraged by that. Hopefully that's been a blessing to you. And thank you for those who may have joined us tonight online. We appreciate you tuning in. We've got one more week in the book of Acts, and I appreciate you being a part of this study. If you missed anything, you can go back and maybe catch up on some of those lessons. And but we'll be finishing up hopefully next week, and then a little bonus feature after Easter. All right, if you we're going to take some prayer requests now. So we're going to go to our live prayer time in here in person. If you have a prayer request online that you'd like to share with us, you can go to our website and leave it there on our prayer page, or in the comment section below this video, you can request prayer as well. And we will pray with you along with whatever needs you may have. But until the next time, hopefully we can see you in person real soon. God bless you, and we'll see you again.